Welcome to Season 3, Episode 17, Quarantine Edition.
Video 1
of the Draft Rugby podcast, where we discuss fantasy Super Rugby, the game they play online in heaven. You can find the website at draftrugby.com and get after us on the socials at Draft Rugby. And tonight, or today, it's this afternoon, rather.
No one knows. This is closed, mate.
That's it. The blinds are closed. I am joined by, for the first time, in video, high definition, HD, Fox Sports HD Plus, by Harry and Nelson. Lads, how are we?
Yeah, look, doing pretty well. Spending some time doing some things I would love to do otherwise. So, missing rugby, that's definitely something that sucks, but yeah.
But we're getting some rugby chatty now, are we? Harry, how are you?
Craving Super Rugby.
How much of past games have you now watched? You know, I feel like you've been leading the charge on watching old
No, I haven't watched too many. I watched a few, but there was just that the one game that I was trying to get on board for was that the greatest game ever played, and I watched that with Nelson and his father-in-law. That was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Until the sad thing was I knew the result, and I was just waiting until Lomu gets the ball in his hands at the end there. It's a bit disappointing.
I knew the result, and I still absolutely love that game. There's things out of that game that make me realise what I think is wrong with rugby currently at the moment that needs to change.
The one thing that stuck with me, though, was Latham led in the first two tries, and I thought of him as a god of rugby at the time. So I feel like I was a little more forgiving at the time than I am now.
But it was early days for Latham.
You trimmed those out of your memory of Latham.
Yeah, that's right.
Very good. Well, yes, no, we hope everyone is keeping well, staying active, and getting through this trying time. We are fortunate enough to be joined here in Palace a la Dahari, where we have been setting up the new Draft Rugby HQ.
Should we show them around?
Our recording podcast.
It's good we can do that. We've got video.
We can. That's right. We've got video. Here we are. The couch.
The calendar. You can see it at the back there.
That's it. The Draft Rugby calendar.
Harry Tucker.
Classic Waratahs flag. We've got an array of jerseys.
There's boxes outside too.
Yeah.
And a few books and light reading out the back there.
That's it.
Well, while Cargie's doing his prep and Nelson and I have got nothing to do, we can tuck into those.
I don't act like Cargie does much prep.
You'll notice that my books are all in great condition and well read, where Harry's are covered in dust because he doesn't open it. But that's fine. Look, it's
not a big reader. It's just more for the image.
It's all a work in progress. We're actually recording at the moment on a computer. We're going to upgrade to. We were working out the AV issues. Harry is in charge of AV, but he'll get onto that. So no, it's a special pod because it's our first video. But the YouTube channel coming soon should eventually be. We've just worked out you have to have 100 subscribers before you can have a custom YouTube URL. But eventually it will be.
It's not coming soon. It does
just
record.
Yeah, no, but I think the custom URL will be coming soon.
Right, yes. Yeah.
Just if you search Draft Rugby on YouTube, you'll find us like everywhere else.
If you want to make it easy to find us, subscribe.
Yeah, exactly.
No, look, I've got a good point. You don't need to search Draft Rugby to find us because you're probably watching us now.
That's true.
It's going to be all over.
That's it. All of our listeners.
No, listen to the audio.
That's true.
No, but anyway,
you're missing out.
Eventually, when you get 100 subscribers, get us there quickly, please, so we can have youtube.com/Draft Rugby.
Yeah. For everyone that's listening, sorry about the whole showing the room thing. That's going to make no sense to you, but we're learning.
That's it. It's the first time. You got the quirks of video production are still foreign to us. So there'll probably be lots of times when we don't realise we're being recorded, so we're doing stupid stuff. So definitely tune in to subscribe to get that content. But alas, anyway. Before we talk about what we're going to talk about today, pod caps. Harry suggested it was a good time to bring back up the pod caps. We've got Harry leading the charge on 64 caps. Good on you, mate. We're into Season 3, Episode 7. So
17.
17, right? Yeah, good.
7?
No, 17.
Yeah.
I'm coming in second with 56 caps. So just after over the half century. And Nelson, like in most respects of fantasy footy, coming in third with 53 caps, but not too far behind in this instance, though.
53 more valuable than your caps, though.
That's I don't think it's even debatable, to be fair. But,
true, it's just so far ahead. Yeah. So far ahead.
And last but not least, we'll give Nabung his shout out because he did get to double digits, 10 caps. So we'll give him a shout out. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? There is no rugby. We're not going to make up some fantasy rugby scores for previous games, as much as I'm sure Harry and Nelson have probably done that a little bit. But no, today we're going to talk about, we've just been missing some rugby. We want to talk some rugby. We're going to talk about what have we been up to recently and what are our plans. for Draft Rugby. We're going to talk about the state of our union of Aussie Rugby and what's been going on. There's been a lot change of CEOs and whatnot, and we're going to talk about the state of World Rugby. So we're not going to go in and look at every different country and their unions, but we're just going to look at the IRB and some recent developments.
We're definitely looking at it through an Australian rugby lens.
That's it, yes.
But we're really interested here.
As you're both sitting there in your Wallabies jerseys.
Yeah, well, that's right. But to be fair, like I really want to know what the New Zealand, Japanese, Argentinian, and South African fans think of it as well, and the rest of the world, to be honest, for the World Rugby news. But obviously, our point of focus that we do all our reading on and keep up to date with is Australian rugby. So that's what we're going to talk about. We try not to talk too much out of our depth.
We'll test that theory in today's pod for sure. But yeah, all right. So without further ado, let's jump in. So what have we been up to recently? Well, apart from, the first thing I said when the boys said, what have we been doing recently? I said, you've been taking up half of the Rugby Ruckus, another podcast. Great guys. We had Morgan Turinui on the pod previously, and Harry and Nelson, I think, take up most of the Rugby Ruckus's Twitter feed with questions.
Yeah, I think it was 2 questions each in their little question section. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then Nelson, you've got your second, third, fourth, and fifth account that you normally launch a couple of.
Yeah, I just say the different names.
Yeah.
But no, their pod, I think they spent at least half the pod just addressing one of Harry's and one of Nelson's questions, which was great. But no, they've been really good. So if you haven't already, do yourself a favour and get after the Rugby Ruckus, their pod.
One of the few podcasts I think that have done really, really well to have super interesting content at a time when there's no rugby.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And also just to further, they're really going for that mission of furthering everyone's understanding of things that are not commonly well understood. So, behind the scenes, which is really good. Apart from that, Nelson has been busy. He hasn't been able to resist getting in front of a mic and letting loose. This hiatus of Draft Rugby podcast has been crushing him, so he has gone and done 2 pods. Nelson, tell us about that.
Yeah, look, I was on Grit Sports, which is a South African group. They're not just rugby, it is broader sport. But look, it was really good to chat to a few of them. There's a few Blitzbokker players on there, and it was just really good to chat a little bit about the Australian rugby situation and what's going on and how that was evolving, because we've had a couple chats, but also just about a few general things in rugby around the globe and how we see things panning out. It was really good. If you want to have a look at any of that sort of stuff, that's at Grit_sports, GRIT_SPORTS. They're putting a lot of stuff out there. I think they're really quite a good company that we hadn't seen too much from.
Yeah, I hadn't watched anything of theirs before you'd gone on there, but that got me across to have a look, and I thought they were really good. They gave a lot of information, really balanced views. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
So they do podcasts and video, because you were on a Zoom chat.
I watched the video.
Yeah, the video's new. That's quite a new thing they've been doing, but it is. They do lots of articles. It's about cricket, about everything else as well. So if you go to their website, Grit Sports, you're going to see a lot to do with sports around the world and in South Africa.
Very good. Yes. No, I think everyone's getting into video now, particularly in this time of working remotely and trying new technologies.
Yeah.
Same. We've talked about doing it for ages. We talked about essentially we sit around and do our podcasts every week, and all we have to do is turn on a camera as well.
The technology's phenomenal. We're in 3 different places, and the Zoom the technology now makes it look like we're all together.
Nice. That's a good joke for only the people watching video.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them across the line, mate. Get them on board.
That's it. Just subscribe to the channel, all right? No, that was very good. But yeah, another reason to see the video is we have already mentioned too, and Harry did a bit of the tour, but no, we've just been setting up what we've been doing. We've been setting up Rugby HQ. So Harry moved into a new house. We bought a new house, moved in, big homeowner, the dream.
Very expensive house. He must make some good money doing that.
That's it. I know. He's going to be bankrolling Draft Rugby. That's all I know. But he has been doing up the house, and he's got a spare room that we're turning into the Draft Rugby studio.
The hardest part was choosing which spare room we should use.
That's true. When you've got 10, it's like...
I just can't believe the wife agreed to it, honestly. Actually, I don't think I formally ever asked her.
Well, that's true. I think we're not the furthest room from where she can hear us, but it's close.
Close to it.
Yeah, that's it. So that's been good. And so, yeah, it's a space we're working on improving. Like I said, we're going to figure out the AV setup. We're hoping to get a different camera, probably get the GoPro streaming, get the wide angle, get the full room in here and stuff.
Talking about, if we look at our t-shirts, lots of Aussies, quite a couple Kiwis in there. We've got a Springbok I suppose it's a gown from the Rugby World Cup, but it would be great
Yeah.
to have
Yeah,
a
what's
few.
it-
I don't know what is it. Kimono.
Yeah.
It would be great to have a few more. So feel free to send us some jerseys put up there, especially South Africans. Grit Sports.
That's it.
Let's get some South African jerseys in there.
That's it. I mean, we've obviously been overwhelmed with our food sponsors for our entree, main course, and dessert. But look, we could definitely use some other merch sponsors.
Yep.
And also, we're looking into some Draft Rugby merch. Nelson is he's been on the design tools, and he's just got so many designs ready to go. But just need a canvas to paint on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Look, our next thing is one of the first things as this evolved. We decided how could we fill this space with some rugby for ourselves, for our listeners, and put some things out there. One of our first thoughts was Rugby Challenge. There's a few different rugby games out there. None of sort of this full encompassing game that has all the different competitions. So we were struggling a little bit. We communicated with Rugby Challenge.
Well, there's two games that were doubted to come out at the back end of last year. That was Rugby 20
Yep.
and Rugby Challenge 4. So Rugby 20 came out, that had all the rights to the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And Rugby Challenge 4 was delayed in its release, but has all the rights to our understanding for the Southern Hemisphere. So we contacted them and basically said, look guys, we want to get these Super Rugby players on board with a few commentators, live stream them playing your game, and then play a online version of Super Rugby.
And we had a few guys out there. Alan Alatoa was keen. I think we had Harry Johnson Holmes. We had a few other guys there.
We had a lot of people.
The players were super keen. I mean, they go home and they play these games as well. You know.
Yeah.
That actually sort of brings to my mind, Augustine Pichot was saying one of the big things that he thinks rugby needs is we need to have a really good global game for Xbox, for everything like that out there, which we just don't have.
We ran into two issues. So obviously that hasn't come up as well as we would like at this stage. The two main issues are, number one, we're playing with Rugby Challenge 3 because number 4 hasn't come out. And that, at the moment, is still on the old system where you can't play across platforms. So everyone has to have an Xbox for us to play and stream with them. No one owns an Xbox.
I was going to say, we can't get into the PlayStation and Xbox debate, mate.
Well, it's pretty clear Super Rugby players are on Team PlayStation. That's a disappointing thing for us, but we've updated maybe 56...
Don't group us in, mate. I'm PlayStation, mate.
Well, when he said us, he meant people who know gaming consoles. Okay. The people that know Xbox is better.
People that contributed to the challenge, Rugby Challenge project.
Fair enough. No, all right, I'll take that. I'll copy it.
So we kind of updated maybe half the lineups on Rugby Challenge 3 for the 2020 side, so I'll make sure those are uploaded for those that are looking for something to play at the moment. And then we've touched up a few of the 2019 sides, so that's still evolving at the moment, but that's a big project.
Yeah.
And with Rugby Challenge 4, we just don't know the release date. So they said basically, they've got their own issues in terms of their media and advertising and their plan for the game, and we just don't know when it's out to be able to launch it for the players to get on board and have something happen. So we'll see. At the moment, it looks like it's going to be Nelson versus I, and we'll see if there's anyone else going to play.
Yeah,
so I don't know how many times you want to see me beat Nelson in Rugby Challenge 3.
It's not going to happen. But another thought was we could do our actual fantasy sides and versus each other in that.
The OG League.
Yeah, so I don't know if people would be interested in that, but I think that would be a pretty cool little thing to do as well.
Fun for us, anyway.
I was trying to look up the information, but I didn't get to it in time about... there's lots of other sports that have been doing things like this, so getting two players in a room and getting to play a console game.
Rugby
players are playing...
I was going to say, Major League Rugby's been doing it.
Yeah,
sorry, Super Rugby players have been playing FIFA, I think Major League Rugby had a good go at this.
They got Rugby 20 on board to get their teams up there, so they've been playing.
They did it very... I thought they did, but they got them to move pretty quickly to get their Major League Rugby teams on board. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the benefit for them is that Rugby 20 was actually already a live game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, the boys have been...
It's out.
Yeah, the boys have been busy trying to make this happen, and we'll continue to work on it, mate.
Yeah.
So,
look, if anyone's got any ideas or any thoughts that they'd like to see, then let us know as well.
I mean, obviously, rugby console games have never worked as well as FIFA or like NFL or things like that. Like NFL, particularly Madden, it's just like a play-by-play game. You know what I mean? But surely someone will crack at it. So, and Rugby Challenge is what, an Australian company making?
It is, from down in Melbourne. Wizard.
Yeah, Turinui and Wizard.
Yeah, and so they've been very good being in communication, getting back to you. So, no, that's been good. All right, what else have we been up to recently? Been up to some admin, so just
behind the scenes sexy stuff that we should have been putting up on the internet, like signing forms and structuring the business, that kind of stuff.
That's it, keeping the wheels turning. We've said we're committed, we're making Draft Rugby a reality.
Well, this is a formal business now.
It is.
We're all involved.
Board of directors right here, mate. That's it. It's no. So we've been busy tending to that. Obviously, coronavirus has disrupted everyone's life a little bit. So there have been. I mean, we all have other jobs and businesses to run. So and families and whatnot to sort it out. So we have been missing recording some pods, and we're happy we can get back together today and spend the day talking some rugby and doing this pod. So all right.
On that note, I hope that we can have a few pods soon talking to some of the players and what they're doing in isolation and how they're trying to prepare themselves for some sort of impending competition. Yeah,
look, at the moment it looks like a couple of the guys we mentioned before, they're keen to be involved. So Alan Alatoa, we'll sort of tee him up. If you've got any questions for him, let us know.
Captain of the Brumbies.
Harry Johnson Holmes, if you've got any questions for him, let us know, and because we'll be talking to them soon.
That's it. Apart from all the rugby players bleaching their hair, it's bleaching when you got blonde. It's bleaching. Yeah.
It is bleaching. Yes.
Apart from that phase, I guess. Across socials that you've just seen, all the different rugby clubs have basically divided up their gym gear, all their gyms, and sent them home to the players. So all the makeshift kind of gym equipment and workouts players have been doing. It'll be interesting to see how they're keeping sane. Not hitting other men every day.
Be careful when you're bleaching your hair as well.
Talking about what the Super Rugby players up to, who was the ex-Crusaders flanker that we were watching the other day on the...
Were we watching Todd?
No. There was the one that went all the dancers.
Oh, Jordan Tafua?
Yeah. Jordan Tafua on Instagram. If you don't follow him, go watch him because he's taking recommendations on songs and basically doing like a 15-second dance or something to each one.
TikTok.
Yeah, he puts it up on his Insta. As a whole huge story. It's awesome. It's so good. It's so entertaining.
So many rugby players are on TikTok at the moment.
Yeah.
Not great content, but they're all on there. So if you like your TikTok,
that's it. And lastly, look, what we've been stoked with is Hugh, our software engineer. Who it's been great. We've really loved the way. I mean, apart from the work he's been doing, we've loved the way he's been communicating with our fans and followers. If you haven't already, there's another Twitter channel at Draft Rugby Dev, where you can. Hugh's been tweeting out updates. We've been a little quiet recently, but
he still responds though.
But exactly, he's super keen to get to get your questions and let you know what's coming.
He's having a big part of what he thinks how we can shape things moving forward as well. He wants to be really involved. So if you have ideas and things you like, run it by him. That's the place to bring it.
On that note, he's actually built in a system on our website now,
forum,
hasn't he? Where you can access and change code to actually build in what you like for the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the amount of info, the depth that this guy goes into for us is insane.
The level of what he's doing, we don't even understand. But like, he's setting up a lot of APIs so that people can access a lot of how our sites work, so they can build them into their own. It's about first and foremost, we wanted to the fantasy rugby game that we want to play. We're trying to make it easy for other people to play their offline games like we do, until we can culminate it in this system, which then everyone will play, will be super successful, become billionaires, and fantasy rugby will be the best.
And then we'll own Super Rugby and make it better.
Sure, that's probably the best interests of rugby in general is Draft Rugby doing well.
Just give us money and we will make rugby good. Power. Give us power.
But no, so that's kind of what we've all been up to recently. I think should we jump on to the state of our union? So talking about a lot going on, certainly been a lot going on in Aussie rugby over the last month.
Yeah, look, I think the most interesting topic that we're going to approach here is very similar to politics in Australia. If you are elected to a role, you're in a role, you are not going to see out your term. Hence, Raylene Castle has not finished her term there, and she's been bullied out of her role there as CEO.
Yeah, 2.5 years. This is crazy.
Yeah, absurd. A lot of the things you're going to see...
I can't help but feel that unless Australia were in the top 2 countries in the world and had completely overhauled how their entire program works and had completely overhauled where we stood compared to rugby league and AFL, I think she was gone.
Yeah, look, I think a lot
of the poison chalice.
A lot of the things there is she couldn't make some of these changes. Like she's now got this coaching staff, which is one of the brilliant pros we're talking about. That coaching squad, she couldn't make these changes till now. You know, like those first 2.5 years was kind of seeing through some of those things, implementing other things which we'll go through, which we think were really good. And then it's these next handful of years are where you're going to see some of the benefits from what the work she's done.
It was the boys on the Rugby Ruckus saying this was her year to put her stamp on the game and for us to judge her. And sadly, you know, she started a lot of projects and then been booted out before she's had the opportunity.
Yep.
Let's see, coronavirus didn't help that either.
No, but I mean, what we wanted to do on this podcast is I feel that everything I read is incredibly biased one way or the other. Yep. It's either incredibly negative or it's incredibly positive, and generally there doesn't seem to be too much information behind the opinions that people are making. And I don't mean for that to be offensive, but it seems to be very polarised without detail. Yeah. And so we just wanted to try and have a balanced discussion on what her time as CEO was like and what she achieved and what her strengths and weaknesses were from what we can see. And would love to hear feedback from others in terms of her role as well.
There's going to be more things that we maybe don't touch on, but we'll go and look at them as much as we can from both sides. Yeah. I think we're starting off with...
And from the best of our understanding.
Yeah, the best of our understanding. We're not privy to everything that's happening and that has happened. But
for some crazy reason, RA aren't sending us every announcement.
Yeah, we're not getting those emails. I don't know.
We're not on their meeting minutes yet.
Look, I think we'll start off with the pros was the fighting fund. That's something that I think is one of the best things we have in Australian rugby. We have this glut of talent.
It's one of those things where it's we've already been seeing the results of it, but it's one of those things where you only notice it if it's not happening. When it is happening, no one takes notice to celebrate.
Well, I mean, right now we have this special blood of talent coming through from schoolboys and 20s last year and the last sort of couple of years. Yeah. And previously we would lose a good chunk of those players to NRL, sometimes overseas, things like that, because there's so many clubs in Australia and Rugby League that they can all offer these contracts, and rugby just couldn't compete.
They were signing them at 16, 17, 18 years old.
Rugby just could not compete. And one of the big things Raylan Castle did was she created this fighting fund to go, yes, you're a 16-year-old player, we believe in you. I know you're getting offered some money from a rival code. Let's keep you in rugby. Let's keep you in Australia, and you can develop through with us. And I think that was just such an important thing.
I think the way it worked as well was it was an evolving fund. So I think they signed 5 players in the first year, and then they would add 4 or 5 to it every year thereafter. Yeah. So now I remember the last announcement saying that out of that under-20s Rugby World Cup squad that came second to France,
close second,
and close second, and also had that fantastic win over New Zealand, they were saying that all bar one of that squad was signed to contracts, and there was a couple signed to Super Rugby contracts, and there's a couple signed from the under-18 side as well. So it immediately stopped this massive loss of talent to the other codes, which should in the next 5-10 years make a massive difference to the cattle that we have, which has been such criticism.
And that's going to reflect for the next CEO and the following CEO. You know, like they're going to be good things that people are talking about them because of the talent that's there, and it's being put in place by what Raylan has done.
And I'm hoping that it's by doing that as well, we're going to see younger players get into Super Rugby. I know it's very easy to pick this year, saying Harry Wilson, Will Harris, whatever. But previously we've talked about New South Wales rugby and the policies of we'll play you in 2 to 3 years after you've been through our system and you'll be ready to play. Whereas look, they're 18-year-olds. It's been quite proven that there's 19-year-olds like Harry Wilson who is ready for Super Rugby. He didn't just go in and participate. He's been dominating Super Rugby.
I think we've got to be careful with that. Like that is such a really, really unique circumstance. I think there are so many people who they've forced their hand and made them play now because of the amount of players that have left. But we're in a pretty special time. I think with that young talent coming through Rugby Australia, I don't think we have been in this. I
guess there's 2 parts to it. There's the players getting offered a lot of money for rugby league at a very early age. But the second part of that is
pathway.
Is the pathway just not being as evident? Players facing more obstacles to getting into a Super Rugby team. I think, look, we could probably all name a player playing rugby league right now that we would have loved to see in Union. I always talk about Angus Crichton, who's playing for the Rabbitohs and the Roosters, who I possibly think could be a Wallabies inside centre by this point. I don't know if that would be a reality or not, but he would be a bloody good shot at it. I mean, can we think of any other players on the top of the... Put you on the spot. Who else? I've taken Crichton.
An interesting thing is just other names, other converts. It's always been a division there, and we haven't been able to capture some of those players. Cooper Cronk, he's a guy that played Australian schoolboys, rugby union, and he got signed into league. And it's like sometimes it's as easy as they have one decision, but sometimes they're on the fence. They like both sports, and we seem to lose that battle if it's a 50-50, or even if it's they prefer union, but they see a clearer pathway in league. We have always lost that battle, where now we have something that's trying to stop that and trying to give us a little bit of that upper hand.
Because they don't just sign schoolboys to like 1 or 2 year contracts. Some of them are like age 17 getting 5-year contracts and stuff. You know what I mean?
And an interesting thing there, if you're a 15, 16-year-old and you're getting these contracts to clubs, you're getting their jerseys, you're getting boots, you're getting all this stuff, and you feel a little indebted to that club, and there's this thing that leagues sort of use to a real strength for them.
Does someone know the answer? Richard Pasatoa, the young Brumbies, 10, 12, 15 at the moment, that's seen as a huge prospect. He was signed at 16 years old, so he's been signed for 2 years now.
He was the
Yeah, that's right. Was he one of the fighting funds? He must have been at that age, right? Or was it just a Brumbies contract?
I'm not sure.
I think it was.
So he's a Queenslander who's gone down.
To be honest, I think it was a Brumbies contract.
Yeah.
I do think it was off the back of the Brumbies.
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
An exception to how young they can sign them.
Just purely from how good he was. But I as far as I know, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. He's come off the bench in 2 Super Games this year, and I'll just say I did go down and watch him play a full game in a Waratahs B Brumbies B game, and he was absolutely incredible. I was very excited about him, but also even as an 18-year-old, whatever, he's got the frame. He's quite a big number 10 who still has all that speed, agility, pace. I was super excited.
I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but
Noah
Lolesio is probably the favourite of the young 10s at the moment because of the success of the Brumbies and how he's held himself. Is Pasatoa going to end up sitting behind him, or they've obviously tried him at 12 and 15 as well? What do you reckon?
If I'll go, I think we're going to see Lolesio as 12. Lolesio has played a lot of 12, and I think that's probably a role that I can see him slotting into quite well. At the Brumbies as well, quite a bit of time they've had Tamua, Liliafano, that 10-12 interchangeable kind of system. And for me, I think I see Pasatoa taking that 10 jersey.
Ira Simone's talked about in the Wallabies there this year. He's playing so well.
Ira Simone's brilliant. But
it's interesting. I don't think Lelesio's like... I know we can have small 12s, but like... Pasatoa is bigger than Lolesio, substantially, taller, and he hasn't filled out his frame properly yet. I guess maybe I prefer a bigger 12.
I don't think Lolesio's big enough for 12.
No, I don't. I don't think
he's not a big guy.
Yeah. Anyway, like I said, we're getting off topic. Let's keep going. Right. Raylene Castle.
Yeah.
What are the other things that she's done well? Okay, so next one, the United package for the broadcast deal. So obviously this has been a big topic of discussion. There was. To me, a huge achievement of hers was how she managed to actually broker a deal where she took all the club rugby in New South Wales and Queensland and got them on board
which a separate institution, effectively.
I don't know if Queensland was involved, was it?
Yeah,
I think that was one of the negatives that we talked about.
No, Queensland.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and they've had incredibly negative relationships with Rugby Australia for a number of years. She managed to broker a deal with them where they were going to help pay for that competition to run and be aired on TV and have it as part of the package that was being sold for the television rights. So it's a whole game approach.
And for anyone outside Australian rugby, there's been this rejuvenation of club rugby. This first grade rugby in Australia. We're getting bigger crowds to some games than Super Rugby. Like they're big games,
Often getting the big club games, the tribalism that's there, the history. There's more often. I would say there's more regularly a bigger crowd at those games than there are Waratahs games. For sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge achievement, and the reason that's such a big achievement is because it was such a poisoned relationship.
And it was unanimous. There was a unanimous vote from all those clubs that they wanted to do this with Raylene. So she didn't just win this. She had everyone 100% on board with her views.
Not only from the broadcast deal point of view, but from building and mending that bridge.
Yeah.
Huge.
And again, we're not obviously talking about how that works, for example, in South Africa or New Zealand, but our perspective on how that works is it seems like it's a lot more seamless in that the relationship of like even high school rugby to then club rugby, then Curry Cup, whatever, it seems a lot more connected, and I guess they're just all on the same page, whereas it's really not in Australia.
There was also like a brief discussion of schoolboy rugby, things like that being potentially a part of all that package and how that was going to work out. Yeah,
I agree. That's another achievement that has not been celebrated enough, I would would say, for the difficulty of the task, really.
Yeah, because I suppose it didn't come to fruition with everything with coronavirus. If that had been a done deal, it's something you can lock in, but it's quite easy, something you can just push aside at the moment because nothing came out of it because of the situation.
And I think that leads us on well into we're talking about broadcasting rights. So, I think Harry was saying, we were talking about this earlier, just saying it's very easy for everyone to sit back and complain, we need to do something about Fox. We've had Fox as the one broadcaster, and don't get me wrong, Fox has supported the game in Australia. Incredible amount.
They've given more money than anyone else to rugby.
But at the same time, we can't just, the business model's clearly not working, and we can't just keep complaining, we actually have to do something about it, and she's gone out there.
Forever, we've been talking about we must have free-to-air exposure to try and expose more people to the game.
Exactly. And so if they can't watch it, they can't know what they're missing.
Yeah, so I can't remember who she got on board. It was someone that, I think, was it the bloke that helped push Cricket Australia's broadcast deal a few years ago? Not sure. He got someone on. They got someone that was incredibly successful in that kind of role. I'm sorry, I don't have the detail.
But as a consultant or something.
Yeah, as a consultant to make this happen, and then put it out there. And obviously, Optus was one of the big names. Yeah. I think they were discussing things with Channel 10 and Rugby Pass and a few others as well. Mm-hmm. And I mean, to me, and I know not everyone agrees, but to me, that was a huge positive to give us the opportunity to actually see. Yeah. Number one, is there other opportunity out there, or number two, what are we worth to Fox? Does Fox actually want us? And are they willing to help a whole game approach that's not just dollars, but putting a proper rugby show on and exposing the NRC to more than one or two games a weekend, there's so much more opportunity there. Sorry, I get really frustrated about that.
You've got a lot of passion there, and I 100%, I totally agree. I think for her that was a very tough thing to do, and I think it was the right decision. And whatever comes out of this now, I'm not saying if Fox get the deal that it was the wrong decision or that it's bad if Fox get it. But the thing is now there's been a proof that it's not only them that want it. They made an offer. They said no to free to air. They offered a certain amount of money, and it wasn't enough for Rugby Australia. So we're damned if we do. We're damned if we don't. If you think it was a bad decision to take it to market.
The other thing is we cannot judge if this was a smart decision or a poor decision until the deal is signed. Yeah. There was talk that Optus was within 24, 48 hours and a week, I think, on different articles of tabling an offer, a formal offer, that may well have changed the course of Rugby Australia for the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, didn't Fox had pulled out of the bidding, in effect. It was left down to Optus, was my understanding.
There was reports of things like that, and I mean, they're straight back on board. And by all means, it sounded very much like these were some hollow threats to try and use whatever control they could, because it was coming out of their own News Corp.
I was just about to say
newspapers. So for anyone not in Australia, News Corp, who owns a lot of newspapers and news outlets worldwide, they own 65% of Fox Sports. Mm-hmm. So for them, they wanted to push an agenda, and some of those agendas were against Royal Castle. And for them to do that, they could have this almost a monopoly on the news, what it felt like, because they were putting so much information out there. So they're saying that, she's said no to a great deal for Fox Sports, or she should have signed with Fox early, but that's coming out of their own opinions. So a lot of people took that stuff on board and said, oh my gosh, look what she's doing wrong, how she's stuffing this up. But
such bias.
Yeah, she was doing what the tough decision was to try and give us other options.
I love that she gave us the option, but we won't be able to judge the actual result of that until a deal is signed. And sadly, coronavirus has probably put us in a really fragile place because all these companies are losing so much money now.
Well, an important thing out of that is Optus have now said they don't think they will be able to table an offer for a year.
Yeah.
So our options...
If they can't table an offer for a year, I mean, how much money have Fox Sports been losing? Like they...
Yeah.
Well, the thing would be they don't have to sign a long contract. No. We can sign a 1-year contract with Fox, and in that meantime, surely Fox have to show some intent to grow rugby. And if it's this constantly bringing it down, then they're going to lose some of this goodwill that's there, that's already being damaged at the moment. So maybe this year going Fox Sports, you've got it for a year, then you have competition. So you're going to have to work towards us.
I don't know what that dollar is going to look like. I can't see Fox paying through the nose for that. But at the same time, as someone that spends their time watching all the rugby programs that Fox used to put out, searching through rugby.com.au for the live streams of the NRC and the games that we can't see, I just want to see them commit to actually growing the game and the content.
can we also just bash Fox a little bit here for where is our weekly Super Rugby show this year? It's absolutely devastating.
They pulled that out before this discussion with Roland Castle.
Yeah,
this is just before they went to get a new broadcast deal.
We'll do it.
They started pulling out.
We will do it. Hands up. Look, we're doing video right now. We're proven on the medium.
If you put Draft Rugby on the title, the Draft Rugby review, Super Rugby review, we'll do it for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
we're in.
Cost you nothing.
We'll get guests. We'll organise our own guests, right? Yeah.
We're fine.
We've already got
pretty good guests. That's it. And look, there's a weekly rugby show in New Zealand, weekly rugby show in South Africa, no doubt. Like, we've lost ours, so awesome.
And we've got diversity. We've got the bald guy, we've got the guy without any eyebrows, and we got this guy.
True, we've got 3 extremely white Australian males. No, well, look,
private school males as well. We're just buying into that whole notion of what this is, what rugby is.
We'll get a female. And then we'll be right.
This is true. This is all a facade. We're actually just chatting so that we get put onto the board very soon.
Yeah,
that's the plan. No. All right. Well, no, that was very good. And there's been a lot to cover there. And as you said, it's been. I mean, can you imagine being a CEO of an organisation taking on effectively the entire media of a country? Like, because News Corp is in effect the media. They own that space.
Yeah. And I think maybe one thing we can compliment there is, even though that was happening, she said if she had support from the board, she was willing to take all those punches.
Yeah.
She was just going to wear them. And this is another thing we're going to touch on, but she just kept turning up. She turned up to anything, no matter what the questions were going to be thrown at her and what that approach was by the media. She was willing to do that and take that brunt. Something that we said Checker did quite well for his players. He took the brunt of that hate, I suppose, from media to shield the other side. Like,
Jones does it well, and she does it phenomenally well for Rugby Australia.
Yeah. No, very good. All right. Well, what do we get on to next?
Centralisation of the program has been a big talking point for Rugby Australia. You know, one of the things that the Wallabies captain said in their letter was basically they wanted to copy the New Zealand model of centralised rugby programs. And while that hasn't been able to come to fruition, and we think the main reason that it hasn't come to fruition is because New South Wales and Queensland Rugby Union need to vote for that to happen, and they have the majority vote between them, and they don't want to give up the power, to be honest, black and white.
Just to explain a little bit, they have the majority vote purely because they have more players, they have more power due to that.
So for it to go to a centralised program, basically those two unions have to say, okay, we trust you to look after the best of our rugby programs in our state and the country and the whole of the Australian country program, and that has not happened. So, you know, under Ray Castle and Michael Checker was a big part of this as well. We're more centralised in our professional program than ever before. We have I think he was the ex-Wallabies and ex-Brumbies strength and conditioning coach, now the head of the whole Australian program. I can't remember his name, but he's very, very well respected, and who centralises all of their fitness levels and all their strength and conditioning programs.
If you sort of paid a lot of attention to things Checker said, whenever those Super Rugby players turned up to the national squad, he didn't have a lot of time to work on that stuff. They needed to be at that level,
and they weren't.
And he said they were not fit enough. They were uneven levels. So that's a huge thing going forward. For one of the big negatives that we've had at the international level is that not only just the Super Rugby level, that's going to affect your international outcomes as well.
And then the other one was the coaching programs as well. I think they've centralised the whole model as well. So there is far more information going through the Super Rugby clubs up to the top and vice versa. So I think that's a really big achievement of her as we all consider pushing towards this completely centralised model, whether that happens or not.
Yeah, there've been discussions in the past of going centralised, and it kind of, no one wanted to rip that band-aid off, and this almost feels like it's a step in that direction. And I'm speculating to say that would be of the reason why she did it, but implementing a few of these things are showing that there's some positives there that we can take out of it, and maybe it is this trickle effect where we get more and more, but I mean, at some point I think we're going to have to rip that band-aid off.
That's true. Centralisation is like it's a word thrown around very loosely a lot of the time. Centralisation and decentralisation, and I mean inherent of a lot of big businesses as well. You know, you get new management to come in, and the one big play they make is we're going to decentralise now, and then 6 years later a new CEO comes in, we're going to centralise now. You know what I mean? It's just like a never-ending cycle.
For us, it's just copy the All Blacks because they've been so successful.
Pretty much, right? It's a good mould. But I think talking about New South Wales rugby and Queensland rugby giving up their power, ceding their power, it's also, I mean, they don't agree all the time very often. I mean, it's like all the politics like Australia. We've found Australia through this coronavirus time is very much made up of separate, whilst we're a federated country, separate, in effect, nation states, you know what I mean? Like, they don't, I mean, I always find this is a great example. You can't catch a train from New South Wales up to Queensland. You have to get off the train near the border, catch a bus over it, and get back on the train, because New South Wales and Queensland have different rail gauges, and neither of them will agree to change theirs. So you can't catch a train up across the border. You have to get a bus in the middle. So it's kind of, I feel like there's some scenarios like that with Australian rugby at the moment. But no, we're definitely building towards it. It's just exactly what centralisation means. I think listening to some other podcasts, the latest episode of Rugby Ruckus has had a great discussion on that. And perhaps it means I think what was Morgs's quote was less suits, more shorts. Like maybe we do need a leaner structure. So it's about how to effectively use resources, but have a centralised power structure governing what's going on, rather than everyone with their own agenda.
A real simple idea of how this would work in Rugby Australia as well, something important out of it, is if at times we've had a glut of talent in one position at one team, so you could have 4 good halfbacks in one Super Rugby side. If we have a centralised system, that control is going to be spread, and you're going to spread those players out. So your best players are going to play. So if we've got however many people in the squad, I think it was talked about on the Rugby Ruckus, when this all started, Super Rugby started, you had your 20 best players in New Zealand from 5 different franchises. So 100 players. They wanted their 100 best players playing. They didn't want 20 best players in one state and 20 people waiting behind them. They took those 20 players and put them into other teams and spread it out. And a centralised system can do that. Whereas if it's you and you have that control, you don't want those players to go to another state. And it's those sorts of decisions that can be made as well with a centralised system.
And I hate to say it, obviously Australia's one of the most competitive sports markets in the world, and we are a nation of sore losers. We need to be 100%. Playing winning footy. We need our teams winning, and that's how you keep garnering support, getting us going forward. But speaking of going forward, I think we're all pretty excited about another one of. We're going down the pros column before we get to the cons and Raelene Castle, but the coaching staff that is now sitting waiting for rugby to restart again. I think we're all pretty pumped about that. So we've got Dave Rennie, who Chiefs back to back,
who vocally said she was a big reason, her vision and her and how she presented the group was a big reason of why he signed.
I mean, you look at the approach that she took compared to the approach of New Zealand Rugby. New Zealand Rugby said, we are New Zealand Rugby, people want to be coaching here, and put it out to everyone. Australia Rugby said, we want you, Dave Rennie, we want you to be our person. We can share a vision with you, what's your vision, and work forward and go, you're our man. And this is a Kiwi that loves Kiwi Rugby. His dream would have been to coach the All Blacks, and he still went, no, I feel like I have a connection now to Rugby Australia, I have a connection to Castle. So that's why he's come out and said, if Raelene Castle leaves, I will consider leaving. And then as
he never said that.
Well, he was questioned that, and there was a implication along those lines. But he was never going to leave, if we're brutally honest.
Mate,
and how good of Raelene Castle to come out and say, if I am taken off my role, I want you to stay.
Yeah. And I mean, look, he's seen that enormous amount of young talent coming through. I think he probably just saw Angus Bell play a game in high school, and he thought, I need to go coach the Wallabies.
Yeah, the world's best prop is going to be in Australia in about 2 years' time.
I want to take all credit for the world's best prop. So no, that's been good. But apart from Dave Rennie, it's also putting together a full coaching team. So whilst I personally, I think we all loved Michael Checker, but I personally still till the end, I liked the one man take complete accountability for everything, coach it his way, and let him have a crack. And I don't necessarily understand. I don't understand how we didn't get some results at some points. Like there were some years where I couldn't understand how we were losing because of just how well I thought it was going to go. But now I think in today's modern era, whilst you do need a really good head coach, you need a really good squad working together.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? He clearly has weaknesses like every single coach.
Yeah.
And I guess his biggest downside was not being able to cover those weaknesses as well as others.
I think an important point as well is a head coach, they're someone who kind of points you in that direction. They don't necessarily do that ins and outs of training sessions week in, week out, which kind of you think of if you've played sports. You've got your head coach and they do all that stuff. Yeah. Here they've got different coaches doing different things, and he's the guy that's relaying that message, making sure people are on board, making sure things are working. And one of the big things out of Dave Rennie, when you look at his time with the Chiefs, he created Chiefs manner. You know, he created this aura, this emotion behind Chiefs, and I mean, it's global and everyone understands what it is. And he flipped them on their head, coming from a team that was struggling in a probably similar position to Australian rugby with some talent but struggling to put it together. Yeah. So now they've got this legacy that's created after he's left, and he implemented that. So he is that person in my eyes that can do that for the Wallabies. He doesn't have to do every little in and out. He's got the guys around him to do it. Whereas Checker, he had that vision, but it felt like he was trying to control everything. Yeah. He wanted to control what the back line was like, and he had issues with Larkham. He wanted to control all these different structures, and it was all on him. And I don't think that's a way forward that Rugby Australia can do, or any team at this level. Yeah.
Well, I agree. Like, we could probably talk longer about Checker, but let's focus on the new men. So we've got in Scotty Wisemantle, who was the Eddie Jones' assistant coach, attacking coach for the England team was it just last few years?
Last few years.
Yeah. And he is well renowned. He has been absolutely an absolute gun. So
pivotal in how they've changed their attacking game.
That's true. Perhaps, I mean, some have said, when I say some, I have said that maybe they stopped kicking the ball 100% of the time and have moved to about 80% of the time under Scott Wisemantle. So
huge. That's a big leap forward.
That is, you know what I mean? So, no, excited about him. And who else do we have? We've got Matty Taylor.
Yep. Former Scotland defence coach.
Exactly. Yep. So if you can teach the Scottish
A coach
the stubborn bastards to defend well, then you can.
Former Wallaby as well.
I think so. Yeah. Yep. And even want some chat about Dan McKellar getting involved in the forwards with some capacity. I don't think I think it's just still rumours at this stage.
Yeah, still rumours. There's nothing concrete that's come out about that.
But in terms of getting someone...
That's completely wrong. He's not Wallaby.
No. He was under 21s and stuff like that, played for Queensland.
Getting someone involved with the forwards, I'd be pretty happy with the Brumbies head coach right now, seeing how well the Brumbies forwards pack has been doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, well, maybe move on to some of the cons.
One more touch on that coaching squad is... Yep. One thing people have complained about is that we've got a Kiwi as head coach. And they're going, what about the Australian coaches and Australian coaching sort of pathway? And throw the name like Eddie Jones out there, who wasn't available to become a coach of Rugby Australia at the time. And that is important noting. But he's a guy that's come out, Rennie's come out and said he wants to help revolutionise that, I suppose, that coaching structure a little bit in Australia. And he's surrounded by Aussies. He's got Wiseman, he's got Matt Taylor, we might have Dan McKellar. There's also Scott Johnson that's there on top of it all, director.
I think that's the thing. If they do well in the next 4 years, in all likelihood, you would expect Wiseman, Taylor, or McKellar to be the next head coach of the Wallabies.
Yeah. And learning
that's
from
their
someone
plan.
Like Rennie. So I'm okay. I don't think there's someone that could fill that role that was in Australia at the moment. But we've got a guy surrounded by Australians who are very capable without enough experience there yet. So hopefully we'll see him coming to that.
Really simplifying it in terms of the, I want an Aussie coach because I want to play the Aussie way. One thing I will say is that with Dave Rennie, for mine, in terms of the way he plays rugby, I've loved that. It's the closest aligned to how I want to see Australian rugby played. Just the way the Chiefs played those couple of years when they won, that's unbelievable for you. So, I actually would love to. I haven't really watched how he has been going. It was with Glasgow? Was he the coach of the Glasgow Warriors?
He took them to finals.
I know they were doing really well, but I'd be interested to see how they played. I think
Matt Taylor was the defence coach at Glasgow Warriors as well.
I'm pretty sure he was there.
Yeah.
There you go. I actually saw a game in Glasgow now, but I don't think Rennie was there. I think it was a couple of years ago.
The other person that we haven't mentioned is Scott Johnson, obviously, who has been brought on top of the whole program as well. So another very, very good person brought in.
Yeah. Very good. All right, well, that's enough for the pros column.
I don't think so.
We got one more.
Do I just keep jumping the gun?
Yeah, you do.
She was a big advocate for women's rugby. And sort of right up there in terms of leading that
women's game. It look real sexist now. Thanks, guys.
Leading that world game for women's. I think there were some things that were put in before she was there. We can't credit her everything. Say for the sevens and all that. That was before her time, but she's pushed that that women's rugby, the Super W, which is the Australian franchises.
Yeah.
She's pushed that side of things.
The 15s has come on in leaps and bounds in the last few years, and
Yeah,
the other thing is she was obviously a part of the Sydney Sevens competition going into the shared competition with both the men's and the women's as well. So one of only, I think, two of the legs of the World Series.
We were the first as well.
And I'm pretty sure now, during her tenure, this is when it happened, that the men's sevens, the women's sevens have pay equity as well. So that's all happened under her reign. I don't know if we can credit 100% to her.
In Australia. In
Australia.
The Australian competition.
In Australia.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, no, that's been really good. I mean, I think it's now been made not mandatory, but and it should be. I'm going to use the word curtain raiser. You can't use the word curtain raiser. The game, if we're having a test match, if we're having a bloody Bledisloe, the game right before it should be
double-header.
The winner. It should always be a double header.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that seems like that's becoming the rule, not the exception now.
Yes.
It's been happening more and more, and I think that's great.
And look, hopefully that brings people like Buildcorp back into the sponsorship arena as well. You know, Buildcorp left Australian Rugby when they were the naming rights sponsor of the NRC, because they had said that they wanted a women's Super Rugby competition, and if we didn't get one, that they would leave. They followed through on that, and they stopped sponsoring the game. So hopefully with the steps that Castle's made and her team has made, we can get big sponsors like that are very important to the game back into the...
can I just say that's a huge play as well. So the Sukar family that runs Buildcorp, they're two guys there, absolute rugby nuts. They give everything to rugby. They fly around. They go to every game. And Josephine Sukar, she has been pioneering, absolutely leading the way for women's rugby. And them to stick to their guns and actually pull out,
awesome.
I think,
is
whilst it was a big blow, like it's massive. You know what I mean? It sends that message.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you sort of said as a curtain raiser and wasn't sure to use it. The big thing is like, we need to have people viewing these. These names need to become familiar. And to become familiar, they need to be on the big stage. So that being before Wallabies All Blacks match, you've got Australia versus New Zealand, and make that a spectacle as well. Yes, you're not going to have the same amount of people turn up, but you need to align these things so these names become familiar. The women's sevens players are as well, if not more well known than the men's sevens players.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right? And that is off the back of results. And to be fair, they probably could beat the men's sevens team. They're pretty brilliant, right?
It's a bit rough. They're going well, the men's right now.
Yeah, the men's
a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago.
We'll give it to
But I mean, we need to watch these. They need to be out there so that they can grow as well.
And I've got to say, the 15s, the New South Wales Queensland teams, who are clearly the strongest two sides in that Super W comp, they're getting a lot better. They're quite strong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to tackle them, put it that way.
I was going to say, I actually still liked a little bit of that amateurism in that you have some really big girls getting in there. You just have some massive bump offs, and I love that. Yeah, it's been very good. So no,
let's push on.
That's definitely been in credit to Raylan Castle. Can I now say, are we moving on to the cons?
You can.
So we're not talking about work rate?
We talked about that. We talked about her showing up. Morgan Turinui gave her a lot of praise, saying she always shows up.
You talked about
40 days.
That was actually you.
Okay, you want to mention her working tirelessly through the...
Yeah, well, reports are over this period she's been working, even with all this...
Walking and working.
Lots. She's been working massive days. Harry, you were saying something about 20-hour days.
20 hours, yeah.
But also, she worked 40 days straight, while a lot of other people were at reduced hours, reduced times, to try and navigate this period at the moment, even knowing that she was taking these huge pay cuts and all this stuff. She was trying to do everything she could with every minute possible.
I have got one more pro, and it keeps coming up. But look what she did to the Bulldogs. I think anyone that trashes an NRL team...
Great.
My hero. Can we get more of them on board?
Can we put
it's like she was working for Rugby Australia before she was even hired.
Brilliant.
I'm so happy about the fact that the Bulldogs are going terribly.
I also think that if we're critiquing the Bulldogs, their own player actions and some of the stuff they've done may have done that.
Fair, very fair.
Alright, well, with that, let's move on to the cons. So, it seems like this is a Raylan Castle love podcast at the moment, but not to be anymore. So,
I hate her. I don't like her hair.
Alright, well, first of all, I mean, you can't talk about Raylan Castle without talking about... He was previously known as He Who Shall Not Be Named again on this podcast, and this will be the last time we talk about it.
Briefly, we're going to mention it.
Israel Folau, we'll talk about him. So, unfortunately, it was not handled well, that scenario. I think hindsight is... Everyone loves a bit of hindsight.
I think a certain aspect wasn't handled well, and that was the contract negotiation after the first incident.
Yeah. And there was a very tricky thing. As Harry, we were chatting about this earlier, saying about there should have been a clause there for media, but with the RUPA, the Player Association, a broader agreement, you can't put social media clauses into the players' contracts. You just can't do it.
CBA, yeah.
So Raylene Castle went about it trying to find a different way, which maybe appears wasn't the right way, saying that, okay, we'll have a handshake agreement, all this stuff, which really meant nothing in the long run, and that come back to bite her in the bum.
This seems to polarize people, and look, I think the very strictly religious are always going to say she's completely done the wrong thing by saying that he can't have his opinion, and the flip side of the argument is always going to be, look, he's an influential figure, there's a hero to so many people, so many young kids and so many adults, and if he says something that can be construed as making someone question their own livelihood, then it can be incredibly harmful as well. So I think the biggest takeaway from the whole thing was he was asked, if we'll keep you in rugby, can you if you do not continue to post this kind of stuff online? And he said no.
Yeah, you said, can you allow our requests? And he said no.
Yeah.
I knew there was a reason we didn't let you talk sometimes. Yes, no, it was, I mean, hindsight, like, it's, sometimes people do go ahead with good faith bargaining, and you say, look, I'm going to trust that you won't do these stupid actions, even though it's not in your contract.
The tricky thing is there, like, this is all in hindsight, and no one would want to have been in that situation that she was in. I think it was very tricky. He was such a high-profile player. It was a lot of our attack.
I've got to say that you can give her credit for trying as hard as possible, because I mean, like, we could have won the World Cup if we had for that. That's all I'm saying. Just, no,
no.
Okay.
You would have been the captain if you ask him. But look, the main thing was, look, in hindsight, looking back, it could have been dealt with better.
And she's admitted that herself.
Yeah.
She thinks she could have done things better.
Mm-hmm. All right, next con. What else have we got?
Look, the other one was, there was some talk that she doesn't communicate very well. So Foxtel will have apparently said they would not work with her, they would not talk with her, which is, I mean, to be honest with you, from my point of view, if you go, hey, we're not going to give you the right straight away, we're going to shop you around, of course they're going to have their back up against her, but that's pretty big to not even want to go to the table with her. Then there was also all the Wallabies players that were saying that when they were reaching out, they weren't hearing anything back. There was Rupa saying that they weren't able to get the details of the finances from the 2019 season. So it seems like, as much as she was incredible at selling a vision, and everyone will attest to that is involved with rugby, she wasn't very good at filling in the other parties of what she was doing and how she was going about it.
There's been a few things that have come out of reasons behind some of those negatives, reasons behind why they weren't coming out with the figures early, like had to sort some things out and find their way forward, because it was evolving. But I mean, realistically, in that role, she has to communicate with people and she has to win people over. That's part of her job there. So that communication is definitely a big issue.
Yeah, I think that's typical of Australian rugby in general. When it comes to really big divisive issues, communication has always been really slow and terrible. I mean, you would just look at dropping the Western Force. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it took so long for Cameron Klein to step down. I think he should have resigned a lot faster, given that. But they were just saying, we'll have this all done and wrapped up by Christmas. We'll have it all done and wrapped up by March. We'll have it. It just kept going on, and it's kind of like, look, sometimes you gotta open up. You can be more transparent. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Particularly, I think in this scenario with your players, right? Your players are all going, what's happening? How much of a pay cut we have to take? We just need to plan for our life, and you should say, all right, these are the balance sheets. This is what's the game.
When things are good, no one asks questions, but things have been challenging in Australian rugby for a long time, and it's when things are challenging that you need to make sure you're as transparent as you can possibly be, and it seems like, or the reports are, that it was a very big weakness of hers, that she wasn't great with that.
Excellent. All right. Another con was just, I guess, the Checker relationship. Now, you don't know how much that's on her and how much it's on Checker, but I guess there's a few examples of just, it's not really insensitivity, but it's just, I guess, look, one of the examples I always refer to is, I thought it was ridiculous that the Wallabies, Castle and Checker were arguing a lot, and the Wallabies were asked to come and attend an event at the Japanese embassy the night before their game with Wales in this World Cup, which was obviously the pivotal game that we ended up losing to not make it through to an easier quarterfinal. And it was just like, it was kind of like, I mean, obviously, obviously there's obligations and requirements, and she would have been doing her best to have that at a different time. And sometimes you've got to give, but there's some things that just have to be non-negotiables, and you can't have any of your players from your team and your coach asking your coach to go to the events, like the night before game.
Also, not just like the fact that she said don't go and make him go. Like Checker was not up to date with that stuff happening. She basically went behind
the back,
and that comes down to that communication and building that trust with people that are really like closely linked to you and your vision and your direction. You've got to have strong relationships there.
Yeah.
There was also some articles out there saying that she straight up didn't really think he should be the Wallabies coach for the World Cup, but kind of accepted that it had to be because of the financial position of the game. And I mean, you really need better back. She did back him. She gave him what he wanted a lot of the time.
Yeah.
In terms of the fact that he had more of a monopoly on the power of how that the Wallabies played than anyone. But at the same time, it's pretty tough being a head coach having a CEO that doesn't believe in you.
Yeah.
Well, for this World Cup, I mean, essentially, I think she should have given him until after the World Cup.
I agree.
Instead of bringing in Scott Johnson and a Wallabies, what's it called? Picking panel. Selection panel. I couldn't think of selection.
Picking panel.
Picking panel.
Actually, I said I agree. Scott Johnson, I actually think that was brilliant.
I think that was a good decision.
Something had to change.
Yeah.
See, I disagree.
Completely burnt the bridge.
Yeah, no, it did. I just wanted to say, I thought you're basically hamstringing Checker just before a World Cup, you know what I mean? And that's...
Yeah, and look, but realistically, nothing changed with Checker.
No.
Nothing changed before or after that. Like, there was no difference.
The biggest issue was, as we said, Checker's biggest weakness was he didn't cover his weakness as well, and it didn't fix the problem.
To be honest, actually, I would be concerned that if Checker was left to himself, Nick Phipps might have made the squad. So
yes.
actually,
that's the difference. That was the difference.
Simmons still made it in though, so I don't know.
Yeah, we can't have everything. Yeah.
No. All right, well, very good. We for this very short podcast, we seem to be kicking on a little bit. So
short podcast.
Yeah, long short. I don't think we have ever done a short podcast, but all right. Well, let's kick on to CEO options.
Yeah, so I think
that's not even our next real talking point. I realise that's still part of point number one, Aussie Rugby. Let's get through it. Who are the CEO options?
So the one everyone knows and have heard about in Australian rugby, and we talked about on Grit Sports, was Phil Kearns. Phil Kearns was the guy that sort of led.
I fully expected Nelson to say Nelson Henry Dale.
I've put my name out there. I did put it up.
He does.
I did.
He's been pushing harder than Augustine Pischer.
Yeah, I was throwing some hate at others as well. Different techniques. But no, Phil Kearns, he's obviously got very good relations in rugby. He knows rugby well. He is a businessman. He rallied 11 captains, including himself, until a day later became 10. So he has got really good.
I think Nick Jones was part of that as well.
Yeah, Nick Jones
as well.
There was almost a combination between Nick Jones wanted the chairman role. As well, so them coming together and leading that sort of captain sort of change.
And look, I think that there was an article that was saying it was almost expected that he would have gotten the job over Raylene Castle, but then Castle had 12 interviews to get the role and just blew him out of the water with her vision. So I think that says a little bit about his chances this time around as well.
Do you think though last time around maybe he was a bit too relaxed? Like
maybe
thought he might have.
Maybe. And everyone keeps looking at him as the ex-Wallaby, and the Foxtel commentator, but they ignore the fact, or they don't seem to realise the fact that he's been extremely successful in business as well. So I don't think he's giving the credit that he's deserved, and I would just like to put my own biases out there as well. He's been said that he told me at one stage, in my eyes, there's only 3 teams that I care about: the Wallabies, the Waratahs, and Newington College. And Nelson and I are former New Boys as well. So
terrible. So
they should become Super Rugby.
So we're biased, but I love that he's one-eyed because he shows passion. There's times that's probably not appropriate, but at the same time, I love that he's passionate, and I think he should also be given credit for his work outside of rugby, which is not as.
Yeah. You can see him making one of these irrational decisions, like what we got to pay $10 million to keep Folau's like a player's do it. We're paying it. Get it. We're paying it.
Look, you can't question his passion and everything that I'm sure is coming from the right place in his eyes.
I'd hate to be the Reds or the Brumbies or something if he was in there. The Waratahs get everything.
But
back to business, baby.
That's right.
It's interesting. There was a talk about who that next who the next CEO was going to be. Was it going to be a rugby head? Was it going to be someone from a business sense? And they're saying a lot of the people on the board are that sort of rugby head. They have that rugby knowledge, that rugby experience. Do we necessarily need another rugby person to sit on top as that CEO, which is Phil Kearns is a little bit of both, or do we need someone that's purely business driven and can manage this on that side of things?
It's funny, as soon as someone says purely business driven, Harry and I are both just about to say, but Bill Pulver was purely business driven.
Well, we've had both.
Yeah.
And all we saw there was we survived, but we also lost the Western Force, and we didn't really grow the game either. So
we've also had rugby people there and failed. So that's a hard thing to go.
I feel like I don't really know the answer to this, and I just bounce back from either side. But at the end of the day, I think I'm biased in that I like Phil Kearns. I could see him on there.
Yeah.
I think he could do a good job.
Peter Wiggs is another name out there to kick on with another name. Peter Wiggs has been on the board for a couple of months now, I think. Long, and basically he has a big role with supercars as well, so he does have to split his time with that, which is, definitely a downside if he's going to continue that role. But
Matt, you can only pick one super, mate. Super Rugby or Supercars?
That's right. Okay. And clearly Supercars has nothing on Super Rugby, but we won't go into detail about that. But look, the word is that he's had a huge role in handling both the TV rights deals negotiations and also how we're dealing with coronavirus. So he's come in a short space of time and really impressed a lot of people in terms of the role he's had in that board. And so his name has been thrown out there as a potential as well. I think he's a former Mossman rugby man as well. So he's in line with the interim chairman, Paul McLean. He's in line with Phil Kearns. So he's got good relationships with a lot of different people as well.
Very good.
The next one is Todd Greenberg. I don't know, this is very briefly thrown out there, but I don't know a lot about what he's done in the NRL. I do know that they've been going a similar trajectory to rugby in Australia, and it has been going downhill in terms of their viewers and a lot of different things there. So again, when we're talking about what Castle did at the Bulldogs, maybe that's a great thing, that he's a rugby man and he's trying to bring down NRL before he came in. But yeah, look, I don't know if there's a lot of talk about him there. But
he had 4 years. I think they said he's grown the women's game quite well. He brought in the NRL bunker. He's been pretty hard-nosed against the clubs that have broken their salary cap and that kind of thing. So I think he's done a lot of good things, but he failed to get Valandry, is it? Valandry on board as well, who's the other major player over there. So
which is probably a good thing from how Valandry's been acting.
Yeah, so they've lost faith in him, and he's lost his gig over this coronavirus epidemic as well. But I guess the thing in his corner is he knows Australian sport and he has experience in this kind of role.
Yep. Even if it's NRL.
I still think it's a long shot. I think his name's been thrown out there because of timing more than anything.
I was actually, just because we were talking earlier, I was just thinking, what's David Gallop up to? Can we get him in there? Soccer's dying now.
Oh,
I think he's still CEO.
He's probably the most highly regarded, isn't he? He is.
Let's get Gallop in. Come on, mate. But yeah, anyone else? Any other contenders that really got there?
Not that's been named, but I think the main thing is it's an external board that makes these selections, and I don't believe that was always the case. There's a big messaging going through in the media and Facebook and Twitter at the moment, always actually, saying it's a boys' club and it's just Newington boys and grammar boys and other private school boys that put themselves on YouTube these days.
No, but that's the problem. There's not enough grammar boys in there. That's it.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's fantastic that it is external. Stephen Moore was quite critical about the fact that when he was trying to get onto the board that he wasn't contacted directly by the board about the role and that it was all external, but I think that's a really good thing.
I'm a big fan of Stephen Moore, but he said a few silly things recently. One of his big reasons for why he backed the captain letter is he goes, rugby union has been struggling for years, so we need to get rid of Raelene Castle. When Raelene Castle had been there for a few years, he just seems like he's caught up in this emotion that he wants to be there, he wants to make changes, and that's his drive, but he's not necessarily from those small kind of things, seeming like he's critically thinking about some of those things. It's great that it's a unique board or a separate board.
And it sounds like basically the position they're in is Paul McLean, who is the ex-Wallaby, I think 91 captain. I could be wrong on that. It's before my time. I was 3 at the time.
World Cup 91 winning.
I think.
Wallabies.
I'm probably wrong, I know. But Watch Nelson's going to correct me now, don't worry. But he is an ex-Wallaby captain who is the current interim chairman. He's the interim CEO at the moment until they go through the proper process to elect someone. So they won't be rushing it. It will be a full process as well. So I don't think you're going to hear anything on that front for a fair while. They're not going to be ushering Phil Kearns in, put it that way.
They've talked about they're not going to rush in. This is going to be a slow process.
Did you find out for me?
I'm reading.
Okay, so let's kick on. One Nelson reads.
Very good. All right. Well,
he ended his career for Australia in 1982, so probably not 1991.
I think that might rule him out. Yeah.
You never know, but
okay. 81? Did you mean 81?
Potentially.
Yeah. No, very good. All right. Well, with that, let's kick on to our third topic, major topic of the day. So that was state of rugby union in Australia, and still a lot more to talk about and things to know about that. But let's move on to World Rugby, just specifically.
I'm sure we're over an hour mark, so we should.
We're definitely over the hour mark, but specifically, there's been some involvements. Things have happened very recently. So
things have been evolving, and this is sort of we're finding out more and more at the moment.
So obviously, they were looking for the head of World Rugby, and it was between Bill Beaumont and Augustine Pichot.
Yeah, Bill Beaumont, he's been in there for 4 years. He ran uncontested 4 years ago. Yep. Pichot was
his
vice.
Yep.
And he said himself he was there because he was trying to make some changes and trying to influence Beaumont to make some of these changes.
Yep.
None of those things happened. The things he wanted to happen while he was there in vice. Out of his own mouth, he said he couldn't make the changes he wanted to there because Bill Beaumont was halting those decisions.
No. I think he just Look,
he did say
I don't think he said just Bill Beaumont, but he wasn't able to. He didn't have the
power.
He wanted.
He didn't have the power.
Yeah.
So he decided he wasn't going to run as vice. He wanted to compete and see if he can take over.
Yeah. So Bernard Laporte was announced as the vice from there. Augustine Pichot within the last few months, I'm not sure exactly when, announced that he would be running against him.
It was quite a close battle as well. So we already knew the Six Nations were going to vote for Beaumont. Sansa said they were going to vote for Pichot.
England captain Beaumont.
Yep. And then there was other ones that were up in the air. It was always going to be tough. Pichot he was starting with 12 votes down that he had to try and fight back. A few of the interesting ones that you wouldn't have thought went the way that you'd expect. Fiji and Samoa both voted for Beaumont, so straight away that's 2 votes. When
I think Fiji was probably expected because the what's his name that was going to Keane that was going to go on to the World Rugby Board. His brother-in-law is the head of the Prime Minister and the head of Fiji Rugby Union. Right. So I think Keane was backed by Beaumont. So I think it was always likely that they went that way.
The Prime Minister by military coup back in 2006.
Let's not get into that. This podcast will go 4 hours.
Another really interesting one was Africa. So, do you know much about what he was saying with Africa? Pichot was talking about.
He just said that he saw it. He was targeting it as an area for growth, and that there are certainly a lot of countries that are really interested and have, I don't want to say fledgling programs, but have a ripe for enormous growth.
So that in itself was 4 votes between them because they've got 2. Africa's got 2. Fiji, Samoa have 1 each.
And he was also quite. Not critical, but he wasn't happy with the fact that Namibia had received double the support from World Rugby that the rest of the African nations had combined. So, there was an article saying that Germany were unhappy. They weren't even consulted about how Rugby Europe were voting. Potentially, there's a suggestion, or not a suggestion, but I would suggest that maybe
You're making a suggestion, mate, it's fine.
I am, but it's me, not someone else. That maybe Namibia or the power there is not quite evenly distributed in terms of how that vote's going as well.
I think the difficult thing was Augustine Pichot was not out there for a very long period of time sharing his vision. So he seemed this guy a revolutionary guy that was going to change all this stuff. And if you're a second-tier nation that feels like we've been getting a little bit of support, maybe not as much as we want, but we're getting a little bit of support, but there are a lot of countries worse off than us, is he going to take that support from us and spread it out to other countries? That's going to make you nervous. If you're Fiji, you're Samoa, you're Namibia, and you're already struggling, and you're going to spread that out to other countries, they're probably going to have this negative thought about that. And that's got to be a tough decision for them because it is how their sport shapes up for the next 4 years.
It is really interesting, and this is a wide conversation we probably shouldn't go to. But if you are Fiji, Samoa, and there's the whole talk of the world game and trying to include everyone and promotion, relegation, blah blah blah. It's like are you in support of that, or particularly now with how everything's been going with coronavirus, with the climate of South Africa gravitating towards Europe and the time zone? If you're the Pacific Island nations, are you thinking, well, maybe no, we want to support Bill Beaumont because we want South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia to break off with South Africa, and then when they're just having a Trans-Tasman competition, they'll also look to include us more. You know what I mean? It's very interesting, kind of.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I think
which way that would steer them though.
I think no doubt if we did break with South Africa and we had a Trans-Tasman competition, there would be moves to include and definitely promote Fiji, Samoa, Tonga.
It's all marketing dollars though, like how do you make it? South Africa is a huge part of that revenue, and those countries aren't going to actually contribute to that. I think Japan would be a more logical place for them to push before they go into those other island nations.
Yeah. When you listen to Pisho and some of the changes...
I just mean, if you're those island nations, what's been happening now hasn't been working. Do you think if we go to this international tournament where, they probably won't make it into that tournament, is that better, or is there a better chance for them if we break off with South Africa? I mean, I don't think
they will make it into that tournament. They were talking about making it the 6 Southern Hemisphere teams, weren't they?
There was a thought. I don't think...
But they will preference teams like Japan, America, even whatever, over the Pacific Islands countries. You know what I mean?
Anyway, I think the big thing was P-Shot was a big push for change. Yeah. Beaumont did change a lot of his policy, so hopefully there's a push that Beaumont then is a bit more proactive in change and bringing Tier 2 nations through. But Nelson, can you take us through the result?
Yeah, so the end result was 28 votes. For Beaumont to 23 for Pisho.
Yeah.
So very, very close in the end. When you're talking, there's, I think it's 12 votes or 18 votes. Sorry, 3 votes each for the 6 nation countries. Italy, I'm not sure if I have a quick look. Yeah, they had 3 as well. So straight off the bat,
3 votes,
straight off the bat, they've got a huge amount. Georgia have 1 vote. So one of the big things was Pisho was saying, I want to make this so it's a contest where maybe Georgia can take Italy's spot in 6 nations. Italy's never going to vote for him, because you feel threatened. But one of the big things he tried to get across to convert some of those teams was he's going, I'm trying to grow the revenue of the sport entirely, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to go, we're going to take a piece from you. He goes, I'm going to make your piece slightly smaller, but the pie way bigger. And again, I just don't think that point got across well enough.
I like to say, as a broader thing, I think promotion relegation is just... I think it's necessary. There needs to be that level of something to play for. I mean, the fact that you could lose out of the competition and how significant the consequences of that are.
And it's funny that Argentina are so supportive of him being an Argentinian player, but he said himself, we could eventually lose our spot as Argentina to the USA.
Because it's good, they'd have to fight back for it. And interesting.
Yeah, that didn't seem to be nearly as threatening to Argentina as it was for Italy. It just doesn't make sense to me.
And
that's the unwavering Argentinian confidence, mate.
That's right.
Another thing that I thought was interesting out of this is, South America backed him as well. Argentina, South America both backed him. But North America, they sat on the fence. They didn't want to have a say really in which way they wanted to go. They had 1 vote from their 2, 1 on each side. So they didn't really back either one. They were just saying, we'll just take us along. We'll do whatever you guys want, sort of thing. I don't want to make any enemies.
Well, they've gone broke, America, USA now, haven't they? So I think they're just hoping that someone gives them a handout, and they want to make sure they're on whoever wins his right side.
They don't want to make any enemies.
And good on them, because if they put all their chips in Pisho's camp, they would have been on the wrong side of the ledger. So smart from them.
True. Yep. Yeah, very good. All right. So what else are we talking about in terms of World Rugby? That was the main event.
I think one other thing coming out of it, Bill Beaumont came out on Twitter saying thank you, and he hasn't seemed like he's done anything wrong. Right? As Harry and I were chatting about this a little bit earlier, he wasn't saying Pisho's got no experience, he can't do this, he can't do that. There was no attacking of each other, which we thought was a really good thing for rugby, seeing as there is consistently infighting in Rugby Australia level at other nations. To not see that break out into, he wouldn't do this or he hasn't done that was really good to see.
There was no scare campaigning.
The one thing I hate about politics is that they spend more time talking negatively about the opposition than about themselves, and it was incredibly refreshing to see neither party doing that.
Yeah. But that hasn't stopped other people coming out and saying it. Friend of the pod, Tait. You can find him at Argentina _2027. probably something that he may have to change.
No, he's getting excited for the Australian Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Change it to Australia 2027.
Yeah. He came out on Twitter saying, this is a direct reply to Bill Beaumont. Very disappointing result. Augustine Pichot's work in the Americas has been extraordinary in comparison to Sir Bill Beaumont's work as World Rugby Chairman has seen minimal progress.
And the game has come in leaps and bounds over there with their professional competition starting up. So, yeah, definitely been a lot of development over there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very good. All right. Do we talk about Rugby Australia loan? Do we talk about how it affects that?
We're going to, but look, Raylene Castle locked in apparently the specifics around the loan before all this.
So the loan, just for our listeners, the loan about to watch the
Rugby
IRB
Australia
gives out to all the different rugby bodies to help get through this time that is ostensibly killing rugby.
The biggest thing that came out of that was basically that she'd secured this loan where we didn't have to repay it all back. Right. No one thought it was a possibility. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't thought about. And apparently she's basically secured this loan. She left the job, and a day or two later it's come out that she'd set this up so we weren't going to be massively indebted in giving 100% of that money back to World Rugby, which is pretty unique.
Very good. All right. Well, talking about the last thing we'll talk about before we wrap up is just how rugby is starting to come back into the fray. So, what do we have in New Zealand?
Yes, so New Zealand have been very good at talking about how they were going to roll out their sport. Australia has now started to catch up with this information, but they've basically said when they go back to level 2 restrictions that they will be able to start playing sport again. So at worst they were level 4, they're currently back to level 3, and I believe that they're looking at going to level 2 very soon. I think within the next week or so. I'm not exactly sure. So they should start training again soon. Yep. So there's the New Zealand Rugby Union should be looking to get back onboarded with some sort of competition. I would think within a month or so. Australia, at the same time, I think they're saying that they will have to look at first groups of less than 10, and it was sports of less than 10 outdoors before indoors, and then they'll go to those bigger groups. So the expectation is they'll start training in groups of 10 with non-contact to start with.
There's one thing that I was talking to people from one of the Shoot Shield clubs. They were saying basically the way they'll work is they'll break everyone up into groups, and you might have 30 people training at the time, but 10 people are doing stuff on that side of the field, 10 people on that side of the field. You're not doing stuff together, then 10 people are in the gym, and you rotate through the system. So you've got all 30 people there training, you're there as long periods of time, but you're in separate groups, you're not communicating, you're not touching each other.
Yeah, it's kind of got to be like with the doctors. So in Australia, we've had not necessarily doctors that are treating coronavirus patients, but we've just had a team of medical staff that run your hospital. They're on for 2 weeks at a time, and another team is off for those 2 weeks. So if any one of the staff gets infected, you just sub the whole team out, new team comes in. It's not like that. You just absolutely separate them.
So you're not seeing about when they're penciling in some sort of hope for rugby in Australia, do you?
So there's a few different discussions about Super Rugby or a domestic competition. We should find out within the next fortnight what they're saying, what they think the start time will be. In terms of what we've been told on our sort of level, the non-professional level, they're sort of saying that they expect us to be good to start going at some point in June. Start training, maybe 2-3 weeks away from where we're at now. They reckon we'll be, or 3-4 weeks away from where we're at now, the start of June to start training, to be able to start playing in July.
Yep.
It sounds like the thoughts that we're going to be something similar for the domestic comp Rugby Australia.
Yeah.
Realistically, things can be pushed back. We don't have our international season, our normal international season, so I think we can push things back.
The expectation is that any competition is going to be domestic, Australia and New Zealand.
Potentially.
As the domestic flights are going to be opened up, their expectation is that New Zealand and Australia will as well, because we have very similar rules in place and very similar numbers in terms of the actual coronavirus infection numbers and how they're dealing with it. So there's a potential there as well, but I think New Zealand Rugby is at the moment seeming to be looking internally as well.
That's it, yeah. We think it will still be quite some time until international flights are opened up. So
the thing is, this is hard. It is constantly evolving. We see second waves coming in certain countries around the world. Australia basically had decided there was going to be a domestic competition starting on April the 3rd. That then got pushed back to May the 1st. It wasn't talked about widely, but it got then pushed back to May the 1st, and now it's been pushed back again. In Australia, they're not out there. Rugby Australia's not out there putting this in public very much. We've got to have the faith that it's being talked about behind closed doors. Rugby League as a differing sort of company in the way that they work is they're pushing it out there, saying we're doing this, it's starting really soon.
We're doing it.
And they're sort of trying to break down those barriers, and hopefully rugby can scoop in after that and get started sooner rather than later.
One thing we talked on earlier about rugby shows and how it's been disappointing there's been no rugby show in Australia this year. I think New Zealand had been very good in their usual rugby programming. They had a TV show, which I haven't watched a lot of, but they had episodes every week. It's called Isolation Nation. And they just got the players at home, just video calling in. So they had the host of it. I forget the name of the rugby hosts on that show, but they were just calling the players all over New Zealand, getting them in, giving little competitions, things like that. And, it was great. So I guess some of the rugby clubs here have been doing some stuff with social media, but I feel like they really could have used this as an opportunity to lift their game and look more into. I think one thing we've often criticised Australian rugby is about not giving us enough insights into the players, into behind the scenes. These people that we cherish as stars, whatever. We want to see what they're like as normal people.
Yeah.
But New Zealand's done a great job of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think one more thing to mention about rugby's return, although it's not talked about a lot, there is an actual return to play committee. So it includes, I think it's Ben Whitaker, the Rugby Australia Head of Government Relations, Anthony French, Rebel CEO Baden Stevenson, Playmaker Matt Samoa. These guys are talking about what's going to happen. They're speculating it's July, but it's all depending on what the government's wanting to do. But they're saying themselves they don't want to promote this date and things change. Like they're really trying to lock in a date and then work from there, and then they're willing to promote it. So we should hear some.
And the final note is we'll start working out what that means for draft rugby in 2020 at least, as soon as we get some details.
Yeah.
Switched on, Harry. Very good. I like it.
So, I mean, we potentially, whatever evolves, we're going to try and run a system. If we can get stats, we will run a system. It may be a slightly different system to what we're doing. We don't know how it's going to look because it depends how many teams are involved, all this sort of stuff.
Could be exciting, If it's domestic competitions, that means redraft, baby. Draft day again. Yoo-hoo!
It could be a redraft.
You would be saying numbers. That. What are you coming in the draft this year?
I think I'm coming pretty high, actually.
You weren't doing bad, yeah?
Top 4, maybe.
No, I don't think you were top 4.
No, I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
I actually don't know.
Realistically,
I would know if I was in the top 4.
Yeah.
Realistically, the main thing to take out of this
is where Nelson is in the table right
now.
We are fully committed to offer a Super Rugby, whatever shape it is, platform for people to try and play. We're going to try and move towards that. Our goal is, at the very least, we're going to have a similar system to what we have now available to everyone. So an offline draft, maybe we're going to work towards doing more things available. Just depends what happens. There's a bit of time there. But we will be offering as much content as we can, depending on whatever this looks like moving forward.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Can't wait to get back into it. It was too long between drinks since our last pod.
It's been a long drink.
I've been drinking most nights.
This has been a long drink. I'm glad that we were drinking pre-pod, not during pod. Because we'd be tanked by now. Very good. Well, thank you for tuning in. And again, looking at the camera now for once, which we're not doing the entire pod. But thank you for joining us. And until the next episode, stay classy.